Dobarban and welcome to another episode. Today we are going to be talking about more newsy type stuff and also one mechanics question. It's not a very unique mechanics question, but I did think it was quite a good one to go to before the beta starts. The second beta weekend event starts tomorrow. So the footage in the background from today comes from Scott AM. Thanks very much to him for that. He's got 6 PvP videos, so we'll just take a selection of those, however many we need. And yeah, so really what I wanted to talk about mostly today was the Reddit AMA that happened yesterday. I wanted to talk about some of the answers that ArenaNet gave and some of my general impressions on some of the most interesting stuff that came out of that AMA. I may as well start by qualifying exactly what this was, in case you guys don't know, if you don't use Reddit or you're not familiar with the term. AMA it stands for Ask Me Anything, and usually it would be an individual that goes onto Reddit and says, hey, this is something interesting about me, ask me anything about it. And that can be a celebrity posting, or it can just be someone with some really weird quirk about their body or something. And generally, people will ask them questions, and as the title suggests, they will answer those questions. So ArenaNet decided to do an AMA. At first, we thought, I guess, that it was just going to be Mike O'Brien that was doing it. It was just going to be one of the founders of ArenaNet that we're going to be answering a few questions. But they turned around really and went all out. It's an AMA that had more answers given than I think I've ever seen out of any on Reddit. It was ridiculous. It had so many answers in it, which was pretty crazy. ArenaNet just got a whole bunch of developers and employees from different areas of the game and basically just sat around in a room, as far as we can see, and answered as many questions that they can. Usually AMAs blow up quite fast if they end up quite big, and the person running it just can't answer enough questions, but ANET really answered a hell of a lot of questions here. So what you can do now, if you want, is go over to Reddit. You can go over to it. You'll find a link in the description if you want to, and you can read all of their answers. A lot of people did summaries of all the key information they got out of it and stuff like that, which is very, very helpful, and you can find links to that kind of stuff around the community too. And I guess I'm going to do something similar to that. I'm just going to talk about the things that the answers that really I thought were quite cool or interesting things that ANET talked about. So first of all, that's what the AMA was, and honestly, from me to them, I think that was really, really fantastic what they did. Just how many people they had there posting the answers really, really quickly. It actually felt like they could feasibly respond to you, which isn't something that would often happen. You know, I used to spend a lot of time in the old Q&As where it was like a big IRC from everyone on Guild Wars 2 Guru or something, and the chances of actually getting a question answered were very slim. I remember the first time I ever had a question answered and how proud I was of that. So this was really cool, and it was really nice to see. So anyway, in no particular order, here's some of the stuff that really struck me. First of all, they've pretty much confirmed now that new weapons will be coming in expansions. Some guys were talking about the engineers possibly getting new weapons and stuff because they were worried about kits, or maybe kits changing and things like that. And they essentially did turn around. This wasn't the only time they said it, but they turned around and said, yeah, eventually the engineers will get more weapons, and other classes, presumably, therefore, will also get new weapons. Whether that's going to be with boxed expansions as they come out, or whether that's going to be streaming updates that just add extra stuff to the game, who knows? And whether that will be to all professions that exist at the moment, or whether some professions will get more because they have less variety right now. I mean, for example, you can look at the Elementalist having masses of skills, and then the Thieves, which really could use another weapon for some more skills. Perhaps they'll only add new weapons to certain classes at a time to try and bring everything up to a balance, or what. We don't know how they're going to be doing that, but it's certainly on their radar. As far as expansions go, they did talk about it a few times. It's on a few people's minds, and they basically said that they do have lots of plans for expansions. Things are being thought about at the moment. Honestly, it's way too early, and I would expect them to say it's way too early, but that kind of stuff, they are paving the way. And in fact, one of the big topics that people have been talking about lately, as I mentioned in a recent Guild Wars 2 Daily, is this whole idea of the trait tiers and the skill tiers that have been added. And pretty much immediately on the AMA, some random guy just asked the question, and they came out with this massive response that they'd obviously already thought about. They knew that people in the community had been discussing it, and you can find that there and have a look at ArenaNet's reasoning. And I mention this because in particular one of their reasons was the system is more scalable this way. For future expansions now they can scale it a bit better, and that progression is somehow kept, which is quite cool, that character progression. So that was one of their reasons. It's nice to know that they are indeed laying the groundwork and making sure that this will scale, that the systems that they've got in the game will work as their new expansions come out, and the kind of things that they want to add, which is really cool. One of the things I was a little bit disappointed about, but also I wanted to talk about and raise awareness of, is observer mode for PvP. This is one of those features that a lot of people have been asking about for a very long time, and ArenaNet just don't seem to have twigged, I guess, that this is going to be really important for competitive PvP to take off in a really big way. It's, if you ask me, a requirement that there is some kind of observation mode in there built into the game for people if they really want their competitive PvP to really flourish and become really big. And they've got this stance at the moment where it's one of those things that they've shifted into this side camp that says after release we'll look at how difficult it is to implement and then we'll go from there depending on the demand. Now the reason why I want to bring it up is because in this AMA you could see so many people were asking about it, just loads of people, and ArenaNet kept answering. I think that's really good that so many people were asking, because it pretty much does tell them straight away, this is in really high demand, we really believe this needs to be in the game, please ArenaNet, can you put it in there? I'm certainly in the camp that believes not only is it necessary for the game's PvP to take off in a big way, but I also believe that if it's not in the game at launch or really early, close to launch, the game will miss out on any potential it once had. I really do believe that. Guild Wars 1 kind of had the same problem. They only added an observer mode far later in, and while that did do quite well with its competitive PvP, the landscape of games and stuff for competitive PvP I feel like was a little bit different back then, and they could get away with having the observer mode added a bit later. But for Guild Wars 2, I really think it should be there at launch, and you know, I can sit back and accept, fine, they're not going to have it there at launch, they've decided that it won't be a feature that's there, but do keep drumming up about it. I want to keep hearing people going on, because if ArenaNet don't see that that demand is there, then they are not going to go with it. And I've seen a lot of demand, a lot of people talking about it already, and if that's still not enough for ArenaNet to be convinced that it's something that the game really should need, then how much more are they really going to need to see? That's a question on my mind at the moment. So I thought it was interesting that they answered this, they stuck to their guns here and said, oh, we'll see how demand is for it after the game's been released. But at the same time, we had all these people asking about it as well, and they just seem to be a little bit unmoving on it. So that's one thing. In a similar vein, dueling as well, a feature I've talked about a few times that I think really adds a lot to an MMO. You know, Guild Wars 2 is making us feel so friendly, and the idea is, originally they said that they weren't going to have dueling because it was all supposed to be cooperative, not competitive, and that was the spirit of the game, a very social game. But I've always kind of had the argument that dueling is one of those features that you can put in an MMO that adds more ways to interact with other players that are around you, which is important in an MMO. If you've got everything really streamlined, like they have in Guild Wars 2, it's not hard for the game to suddenly feel like you're not playing with other people, you're just playing alongside other people. We need a lot of ways, in my opinion, to interact with other players out in the game world, and dueling is one of those perfect features to do that. It's another way to actually experience the game with someone else and interact with someone else. And I think Guild Wars 2 is missing something like that. I've always enjoyed dueling, and I was a bit disappointed that they said that there wasn't really something that they were looking at for Guild Wars 2, but they did say in this AMA, and they've been saying it a little bit recently as well, I suppose, that this is also in the same camp now as spectator mode. Depending on how much demand there is for it, and particularly how difficult it will be to add to the game, they will add it in post-launch. But it seems pretty sure that dueling will be there post-launch at some point now, which is cool. It's just, it always becomes a question, even if they were to have confirmed, which in some ways they have at this point, that dueling will be there post-launch, it now gets to the point where you have to ask yourself, okay, you've said post-launch, but how far away exactly is that? Because again, not to such a great extent as the observer mode that PvP is lacking at the moment, but dueling is also a feature, you know, if you wait too long with these things before adding to the game, then, you know, in some ways I kind of say they may as well have not been there in the first place, because that big spike of original players in the game, a lot of them are going to leave very early, and ArenaNet can't do anything to stop the masses of people leaving once they've played the game. That happens with every game, MMOs or not. But if these features aren't in there earlier, they're going to retain less people than they otherwise might have, and it all adds up. So anyway, that's another thing that's in the same kind of camp. That I was quite excited to see that now they seem to be much more open about the idea of dueling being in the game, compared to what they were at first saying with original interviews, which is really, really cool. So there's that. Another thing, again on the same vein, I'm loving my segues here, something else that they once said that they really didn't want in the game because they didn't think it was supposed to be in the spirit of the game, but now seems to be on the plans, and not even post-launch, actually at the launch, is build templates. So a long time ago, a lot of us were still kind of ingrained in the Guild Wars 1 mindset, and we were asking ArenaNet, hey, is there going to be a way to save builds and load builds and stuff like this that was so important in Guild Wars 1 because it was such a build-centric game. ArenaNet originally originally were saying, well, Guild Wars 2 is supposed to be more about skill, and, a lot of the skills are more for flavour and stuff. It's not so much about the build, so we don't think we need a system like this in the game. And that's something they were originally saying. But now, somebody asked a question. They were talking about how, as an elementalist, obviously you only have one weapon. You can't swap weapons in combat. But they said it's kind of annoying to have to go into your inventory all the time to do that swapping. Could we get weapon swapping for the elementalist there, like the UI functionality, shall we say, but just have it disabled in combat? And ArenaNet's reply to this was basically that they did want to have build templates, fully fledged build templates, just like we had in Guild Wars 1, I suppose, to be there in Guild Wars 2. Probably not exactly the same system, because they described it as more of a hot swapping kind of thing. So you could just quickly hot swap between different, sets of traits and gear, I suppose, all at once, which could be very cool, and skill bars as well on top of that. So they did describe a system like that, which was something they once said wasn't going to really be in the game, but now is. And I don't think, I don't blame them for going back on stuff like that. Obviously, the game has evolved and it's been iterated on since that time. And if that's now a feature that is more relevant, then hey, I'm glad that they're still open to these changes, even after, a long time ago they might have said, it's not something we're really looking at. So yeah, and that also could be there at the launch of the game, it certainly looks like, which is going to be quite cool, particularly for PvP, I guess. You can play your profession and then you might play a game of PvP or whatever, and when you get back out before you load into the next match, hey, just hot swap into a different build and off you go. That should be really fun, so I'm glad that they're doing something like that as well. Another thing we talked about recently there's no segue here, that's a bit of a shame. Another thing we talked about a little bit on Guild Wars 2 Daily recently was item previews. We were talking about how the die system obviously has the functionality there. You can see that they have got a preview system kind of going on, but you can't preview stuff before you buy it, and that's going to be quite important for a game like Guild Wars 2, where so much revolves around how you look and cosmetics rather than statistical gains that you get from, participating in the end game and stuff like that. Where the game is so much more heavily focused on how you look, really a preview feature should be pretty important for Guild Wars 2, especially compared to other MMOs, and it wasn't there. Well, they did ask, somebody asked pretty much this exact thing, and they said, is that going to be happening? And ArenaNet, this is kind of in the same camp actually as those other things, Dueling and Observer Mode, that they are certainly looking to do it. It just depends how difficult that will be. So that was really nice to see them doing as well. It really does feel like they are looking at the little things that are missing, that we've noticed that are missing, because obviously we're the fans and we spend all day scrutinizing little stuff like this, and it's cool that they decided to go with that, so I was very happy about that. Amulets as well, swinging back to PvP again. Amulets, if you don't know, I've never really talked about them on Guild Wars 2 Daily, honestly, because I never played much PvP in the last beta weekend event. They're these items that you could get from PvP vendors for free, mind you, but in the launch of the game they might cost karma or something, we're not 100% sure. But these are items that you could slot, that you'd get in PvP, that would dramatically change 3 stats. So there were amulets, and depending on what one you picked, a specific attribute would go up. So condition damage, critical damage, precision, toughness, vitality. One of these would be majorly affected in some way, and you would have 3 stats would change with every amulet that you chose, and one of those stats would be boosted far more than the other 2. So you had these different amulets that were there and were available, and they had a very significant impact on the kind of build you were playing and how effective you were at certain things. So just so that we're clear here, so for example, an amulet might increase your healing power by 580 points, okay? It might increase your precision by 580 points, and then it might also increase your toughness by 813, which is like ridiculously more. But then obviously it changes. You can have different amulets that boost different stats, and then out of those stats, one of them is boosted higher than the others. Lots of customization, interesting stuff there, and really in the AMA, just bringing this up to let you guys know, ArenaNet said more amulets will be available, which is very cool. I believe there was also a question about why the ArenaNet chose to have so much emphasis on amulets as well, which is quite an interesting read. Last of all, just before I go into this quick question before we end the episode, they have announced that this is not the last beta. I mean, I don't think any of us should have been really expecting that. They are very much looking at betas in a very traditional sense, not just something for marketing, but they are actually looking at what people say about it, and then they will decide whether they're going to have another beta, and then maybe another beta, or whether they're then going to launch. So they say that there is at least one more beta to come. I'm expecting 2 betas. Maybe 3. I wouldn't mind if there were 3, but I'm expecting 2, but definitely at least one more beta after this. So if you can't participate this weekend, don't worry too much. There will definitely be another one coming. And yeah, really, that kind of just jumps me into this last question, which I saw on my last mechanics video, which came from CR1541, who said, "Is it just me, or do you think it's about time the game is released? I mean, I love ArenaNet and they have my full confidence, but the hype is at full swing, and now it seems to be getting to the critical stage of just becoming a deterrent to certain people. We've played the game and it's ready for release. There will be bugs, but there will always be bugs that they can fix post-launch. Now's the time to get the game out. Our patience has been tested enough and they need to get the game out." This is a question that you've probably all heard a million times, but I wanted to put a certain spin on it. That you mentioned here about how the hype is at full swing. People have been making this argument for ages. This is like 2 years ago, people were making this argument. Since the first trailer came out, people were making this argument. They were saying they need to find a release date. They need to start talking about actually releasing the game. The game is super hyped up right now, and it's only going to drop down, and they're not going to get back up, and they're missing out. And it's an argument that constantly comes back up. And I just want to point out that really, that's complete BS. The hype has not and never has dropped massively down from an average level. For example, if you go onto, and I love doing this, if you go onto Google Trends and search for Guild Wars 2, you can see how many people are searching for it. Basically, it's just an indication of hype, right? You can see how many people are searching for it over a period of time. And you can see like massive spikes when certain stuff happens. You know, a couple of years ago when you looked, you'd see the biggest spike was like when the first trailer came out, and then the Gamescom demo, and then the biggest spike at the moment is when pre-purchase became available, and it's huge, but it always then drops back down to a normal level. And if you look from trends, you can see that normal average level has still been rising and going up and up and up. And if ArenaNet did just release the game and listen to those people and believe that hype was just going to end immediately after that first trailer, the average level would be so much lower right now. I just want to dispel that kind of myth that the hype will reach a certain point and then bubble and boil away. It doesn't work like that. I really don't think that's going to be what will happen. We'll have the release date announced, and we'll have another big spike, a massive spike, bigger than we've seen before, and at that point obviously the game will have a release date anyway, and people will know when to go out and buy it. So yeah, don't worry about that. The game will come when the game comes. I very much respect ArenaNet for sticking with the when it's ready thing, and really, well, that's all we can do. We can just wait, and it's not too much to ask to wait. At the end of the day, you're going to be playing the game hopefully a lot longer than you were waiting for the game, so isn't it a good idea just to wait that little bit longer? Anyway, there you go, guys. That's Guild Wars 2 Daily for today. A mix of news and a question. What do you know? I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks again to Scott AM for the footage in the background. If you've got any questions for me that you might like to appear in another video, please let me know. Beta weekend begins tomorrow, though. I don't know what I'll be doing for daily. I will have dailies going up during this beta, though. This beta weekend, I will definitely do my best for that. And yeah, I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening, guys, and I hope to see you in the beta. See you next time.